Because pretty much all the graphs and models that we're learning in AP macroeconomics are going to be here. Not all of them, like when we do the comparative advantage, that doesn't link to this as easily, but most of it is going to be here. So it's almost like I should have left this up there at the beginning of the semester. Like if you understand this, then 75% of the class is done. A lot of it is a lot of concepts and everything else that you need to go over in depth. But if you understand this, it's useful. Now, there's also going to be a lot of arrows and points and things that are pointing and then showing it here. And what happens is that you need to, it's a process rather than just taking a picture, because I'm going to be changing the curves, shifting them. So that's going to be a little bit tricky. So make sure you listen to it and pay attention to it. Stop me if I'm going too fast so you can actually draw those things. And that's why I'm recording in here so that I can put it on a website. Then if you want to review, that's a good way to kind of look at it and review. And also from the previous semester students who took it last semester but want to review right now before we take it. So yeah, I do this like every class almost, so this time before they review. So it's just like these graphs again and again and again. It's almost like I'm dreaming about graphs at night. It's too much. But, okay. So when we get started, we're going to start right here because we're going to put some more graphs over here. Really, we're going to start with the key macroeconomic graph, which is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. That's a good idea that if you're using different color pencils, because I'm going to use different colored markers in here to distinguish between the what's the original situation, what is the solution, and what are the side effects. Okay. All right, guys, listen up. So, pretty much what we're going to do is that I'm going to do the similar situations up here, and then we're going to solve it with viscous policy, we're going to solve it with monetary policy, and we're going to compare and contrast. So there's only 3 different situations that we can kind of draw the economy in. Recession with inflation, recession, which would be stagflation. Or recession with low inflation, the economy at full employment where inflation is normal or low, and then inflationary scenario where unemployment is not a problem but inflation is high. So if we drew the market in full employment, then there's no point for us to do any kind of solutions because don't solve the problem if it's not broken. So let's choose the recessionary scenario. I'm going to draw aggregate demand, aggregate supply in the recession. Okay. Now we have the same graph down here, the economy in recession. Okay, so what we have here is that you have price level, real domestic output, aggregate supply curve, aggregate demand curve, where aggregate supply and aggregate demand intersect, that's current output, and that's current price level. Right? And then we've got long run aggregate supply curve, which rests at full employment. And economy is to the left, the output economy is operating to the left of full employment, so we're in recessionary scenario. Right? We have the same thing down here. Whenever we do the solutions, right, there's going to be 3 different variables that we're going to worry about and care a lot about, which is price level, real domestic output, and unemployment. So let's write them out. Price level, real domestic output, unemployment, right, here too. Okay, so Now, this is the original situation. We can draw the same situation with production possibilities frontier. So let's draw it in production possibilities frontier. Product A, product B. This is production possibilities frontier. Now, where is the current output in here?
On the line.
Is it on the line or inside the line? It's inside the line, because this is the current output. The full employment output, which is the long run angle supply curve, is this, right? And so the point is somewhere inside. And I'm just going to put it right here because we need to have some maneuverability. We need to change this, so I want to give myself some room. And again, product A, product B, production possibilities frontier, the same thing over here. We can kind of draw, we can draw also Phillips curve in here. Phillips curve on vertical axis, we have inflation. So here we have unemployment. And that's the Phillips curve. I'll show it on Phillips curve. Where the current output is right here, which reflects some level of unemployment and inflation. Inflation, if we're assuming in here that inflation is low and unemployment is high, we're right here. But we can also kind of look at it and say, well, we're assuming that since unemployment is over here and unemployment is higher than natural rate of unemployment, this is natural rate of unemployment, which corresponds to the full employment rate of unemployment. Right? So that's that. If we want to kind of present the original situation with those. That's natural NRU. Okay, so we've got original situation here, right? The solutions I'm going to do in blue. So fiscal policy or monetary policy solutions, it's going to be in blue. Right? So since we have recession, what kind of a fiscal policy do we need to do? This is government expansion. Right? So they're going to do expansion. So let's write it out. Two tools, taxes and government spending. What is government going to do with taxes? If they're doing expansion?
Decrease.
They're going to decrease it. And what are they going to do with government spending? Increase it. So taxes are going to decrease, government spending is going to increase. Now this is going to affect aggregate demand. So let's write out the formula for aggregate demand. So aggregate demand equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Demand equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. I'm not writing them in there yet because the original situation is in black. The solutions that affect one of the components of that is going to be in blue. So in here, expansion of fiscal policy is going to affect consumption and government spending. And in here is going to affect consumption and gross private domestic investment with monetary policy. And then side effect, we'll look at crowding out effect, is going to be in green. So it's going to affect gross private domestic investment. And then another side effect, which is net export effect, is going to affect net exports. That's going to be in red. So that's what we're doing. In the end, when we're doing these problems, we're going to problem solution comes back to this, and we're going to look at the side effects. We're going to look at all these other things. We're going to keep coming back to this formula here, and we're going to keep coming back to this kind of central area, central nervous system, right? And then from here too, when we do the problem solution, we're going to keep coming back. Okay, so taxes down. This causes disposable income to increase. It doesn't directly affect consumption yet. It affects people have more money. Right? And if they have more money in their pocket, they do two things with their disposable income. What are those two things? Spend or save, right? So some part of it they're going to save, so that means there's going to be more savings. Some part of it they're going to consume, so that means higher amount of consumption. Right? So there's two things. So it increases both savings and consumption. Savings doesn't affect aggregate demand in the short run right now. But we're going to leave this dangling out here. We're going to leave this, kind of a thing that is not tied. We're going to tie that back into the system in a while. And I'm going to do that in a little while, right? So right now, taxes down, disposable income goes up, consumption goes up. as a result of that. Government spending goes up. That's the same thing as government spending here. Government spending goes up. And because government spending increase and consumption increase, that causes aggregate demand to increase. So let's say that we move aggregate demand not all the way to production cost space frontier. Move it here. Or not all the way to long run. We move it right here. This causes price level to increase. And this causes output to increase. So we're going to come back around here and draw that. Price level increases, output increases, unemployment decreases as a result of that. Because if output increased, companies are going to be producing more goods and services, right? Therefore, they need to hire workers and then unemployment goes down. Now, how is that going to change production cost per frontier? What's going to happen in here?
It's going to go up to 1.
It's going to go close to the line, since we didn't move all the way to the production cost per frontier. The production cost per frontier, which is the long run average supply curve, is the same thing. That hasn't changed. So the production cost per frontier stays the same. But the current point moves somewhat out closer to the line. That's what happened. Right? Down here, look what we just did. We just increased price level and decreased unemployment. The price level was same thing as inflation. Inflation went up, and unemployment went down. So we moved from here to somewhere right here. Okay, so that problem solution, we're going to show that in here. Now let's do the solution with monetary policy. Yeah, you have a question?
I don't know.
Okay. So what kind of a monetary policy is Federal Reserve going to conduct? Expansionary, otherwise easy money, right? Easy money policy. They're going to pump more money into the economy, so let's write that out, easy money. There's 3 tools. Well, actually, there's a 4th one when we're looking at the federal funds rate. But on AP, most of the time, they're going to be asking you about these 3 tools, which is open market operations, discount rate, and reserve ratio. And I'll talk about the federal funds rate. So first tool is open market operations. I'm writing down here is OMO, open market operations, which is Federal Reserve buying and selling bonds, government bonds, right? It's not the bonds the Federal Reserve is. It's Treasury that issues those bonds and is out there in the market. So Federal Reserve goes out there and buys it. If it buys it, or it can sell bonds. It has bonds in its kind of a vault. So in this case, because of easy money, what is Federal Reserve going to do? Is it going to buy bonds or sell bonds? Buy bonds, because when it's buying bonds, it's buying it with dollars, and dollar comes out of, money comes out of the Federal Reserve and into the economy. If the money is inside the vault in Federal Reserve, then it doesn't exist in the economy. If it comes out, then there's more money in the economy, and comes from the economy, so therefore done buy bonds. Okay, 2 is discount rate. Is the interest rate that Federal Reserve charges its member banks, its commercial banks, when they want to borrow money, right? And if they're charging lower interest rate, those commercial banks are going to actually borrow more money. It's cheaper, right? It's cheaper. They can borrow money, and then they can lend their money out into the market, to the commercial customers, consumers, and others, and lend it out at a higher interest rate, make that the difference between the interest rates, and it's advantageous. So it gives incentive for the banks to lend money out, to borrow money and to lend more money out. That doesn't mean that they're going to do that. It might be the case of confidence, business confidence. They're like, well, even though people are willing to pay a higher interest rate, or the commercial businesses are willing to pay a higher interest rate, they might be risky because the economy is unstable and everything else, and they might not lend money out. But at least this gives incentive for these banks to lend money. And then we've got reserve ratio. Reserve ratio is set by Federal Reserve, and it basically charges and says, look, banks have to hold a certain amount of checkable deposits in the vault. And if Federal Reserve lowers that, banks don't have to hold as much money in the vault, and they have more money available to be lent out. That's what we call excess reserve. Now this is going to affect aggregate demand, but not yet, because when we're comparing, when we're connecting these models and graphs, think of them as like Legos. Some Legos pieces don't work together and don't fit together, right? We have to find other Legos pieces to be in between. In here it fit right here. This directly affected this, and then it affected this. But in here, this doesn't directly go to that. You have to put other Lego pieces in here, other graphs. Right? This we know is the same as easy money policy. All of these things will increase supply of money. So which curve, which graph is it that represents supply of money?
On this graph?
Not on this graph, on a new one. Money market, right? Money market, excellent, is the one that actually presents supply and demand for all the money in the economy. So let's draw money market. We've got nominal interest rate on the vertical axis. We've got quantity of money on horizontal axis, which is the same as M2 measure of money. We've got supply of money, that is vertical. We've got demand for money. And in here, I'm not going to draw this, but basically what you have is that you've got transactional demand like this and asset demand like this. There's two components of demand curve. That really matters. So that's nominal interest rate. Supply of money, demand for money. Okay, good. Now, this is the equilibrium nominal interest rate right now. So as a result of Federal Reserve pumping more money into the economy, because of the easy money policy, supply of money shifts to the right. Partly because of actions of what Federal Reserve has taken. The actual money comes out of Federal Reserve vault and into the into the models, into the economy. But big part of it also is that when Federal Reserve gives incentive for these banks to lend more money out, these banks lend out money, and through money creation, money multiplier, their lending becomes check-up deposit in other banks, and then they have more check-up deposit, and they lend out more money, and on and on and on and on. So it creates more money in the economy. Right? Okay, so that's what happens. This causes nominal interest rate to decrease. Again, we still can't link it to this yet. What we want to link this to is when we're looking at the gross private domestic investment. Well, we want to look at the graph that links gross private domestic investment and interest rates, which is investment demand curve. So we've got real interest rate on vertical axis right here, and we've got gross private domestic investment, IG. Now this links to this, right? So we want to connect that to it. This is investment demand curve, let's say, IG. And we want to see how these two are connected, which we got a little bit of a problem here, because this is real interest rate, this is nominal interest rate. But we know that real and nominal interest rate are related to each other through this formula. Real interest rate equals nominal interest rate minus inflation. We know that we just decreased the nominal interest rate. If we can figure out what's happening to inflation, we can figure out what's happening to real interest rate. Well, there's three possible things that could be happening to inflation. Inflation could be increasing, inflation could be decreasing, or inflation could be staying the same. Well, when we're looking at this situation here, inflation staying the same, that's definitely a possibility. Nothing yet affected aggregate demand, therefore price level is the same thing as inflation, therefore inflation stays the same. So that's one possibility. Inflation is staying the same. Or we could say, what about inflation decreasing? Well, we're assuming other things are held constant in here. No other things are affecting this. So because of this action, this will only cause aggregate demand to increase or stay the same if it didn't work. So the price level would stay the same, but it would definitely not decrease. Right? Which aggregate demand is the same thing as aggregate demand. So price level decreasing is not an option. But what about price level increasing? So, well, that could definitely happen because when nominal interest rate decreases, this is going to affect consumption. Not all consumption, but interest-sensitive consumption. Consumers buy products with cash and debit cards, but they also buy products with credit cards, and when they have to finance those products, because those are more expensive, larger items like cars and appliances and houses, right? People don't have a lot of cash laying around to pay it all up front, so they have to finance it for 2 years, 3 years, or houses for 30 years, right? So if the interest rate that they're paying on their financing for those items is lower, the price of those cars or the appliances or houses are lower. Therefore, they're going to buy more of it. So consumption will go up. If consumption goes up, aggregate demand goes up. If aggregate demand goes up, that causes price level to go up, which means that same thing as inflation increase. So there's two things that could be happening to inflation. It could be staying the same or it could be increasing. Now let's look at it. If nominal interest rate decreases and inflation stays the same, that means same amount of money, same amount of nominal interest rate minus the same, lower amount of nominal interest rate minus the same amount of inflation causes real interest rate to decrease. If nominal interest rate decreases and inflation goes up, a lower amount of nominal interest rate minus larger amount of inflation, that means real interest rate decreases even further. We really don't care in this situation if real interest rate, how much real interest rate decreases. We just know that relatively decreases, right? Relative decrease. So that causes real interest rate to decrease, which causes investment to increase, and that's the same thing as this right here, and investment increases. Investment increases and some part of consumption is interest-sensitive consumption increases, that causes aggregate demand to increase. And we shift aggregate demand to the right. As a result of that, price level goes up, output goes up, price level goes up, output goes up, unemployment goes down. And then we can do the same thing in here too. The point moves this way, same as what we did up here, and this point moves this way, same as what we did. So problem, solution, right? We're kind of comparing and contrasting. It kind of looks like it takes a lot more for monetary policy to affect the aggregate demand, but in reality it's actually faster. Because monetary policy is conducted by Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve can get together and make decisions very fast for the bank, if it needs to. Fiscal policy is conducted by government, which is Congress and President and the whole government infrastructure and everything else. And when they want to actually pass certain bills, meaning that they have to change the taxes, lower taxes or increase government spending and deciding that, it takes a while for them to do that. So it might be a little bit delayed for this. Because it takes a while for them to decide, oh, we should increase government spending. Where should we increase government spending? Well, let's open up, increase government spending in military rather than infrastructure or anything else. So all these disagreements, but it's finally come to an agreement, but it might take a while. And here, the decision can be made very fast and impractical. Another thing is that, well, this is useful, it's good. I mean, politically, it's easy to propose and to convince your constituents to actually implement expansion of this policy, because you're telling them, I'm going to decrease your taxes, you're going to have more money in your pocket, I'm going to increase government spending. Well, that's great. But what if we had a reverse situation when we had inflationary scenario? And if we had an inflationary scenario, we would have to do contraction fiscal policy. That means government has to go out there and convince people, oh, I'm going to increase your taxes, you're going to have less money in your pocket. And at the same time, I'm going to decrease government spending. Well, that's difficult for them to do. So the prevalence is more towards expansion of fiscal policy rather than contraction fiscal policy. But those are the kind of disadvantages of fiscal policy and advantages of monetary policy. The advantages or disadvantages of monetary policy is that in this situation, as I mentioned, it's like Federal Reserve is giving carrot to the business, to the banks, to lend more money out. And it's up to those banks to lend the money out. But if they are not confident about the future of the economy and the economic growth, on how the consumers are, their borrowers are, what kind of an industry they're in, and anything else, they might hold on to the money and not lend it out. that it might not work. Okay, so problem, solution. Now let's look at the side effect. So the side effect in here is taxes down, government spending up, right? That causes government budget deficit. There's two things the government can do to actually solve the problem of deficit. They can borrow money, or they can print money. Let's follow this route. We're going to leave this out here again. We're going to come back to this. We're going to tie that in, just like we're going to come back to savings. If government borrows money, well, that's going to affect loanable funds market. On vertical axis of loanable funds, we have real interest rate. Down here, we have quantity of loanable funds, LF. We've got supply of loanable funds. We've got demand for loanable funds. Okay. Who is supplying loanable funds in the market? Remember, there's three major players in the economy, macroeconomy: households, businesses, and government. Who is lending money out? Households. Households are the ones who are supplying loanable funds. Who is borrowing it? Government and businesses also, right? You can kind of tie into some households too that borrow it, but mostly we're talking about here the business and the government that demand for loanable funds. It's the households that supply loanable funds, right? So because it's the government that is borrowing money, that causes demand for loanable funds to increase, to shift to the right, which causes real interest rate to go up. Okay? If real interest rate goes up, well, that's going to be linked to the investment demand curve, so let's draw in the investment demand curve again here. We've got real interest rate, vertical axis. We've got gross private domestic investment, IG. And as a result of this, real interest rate has increased. And that causes investment to decrease. Now, why did I do this? That's because vertical axis of the investment demand curve and vertical axis of loanable funds market are the same. They're interconnected. So this used to be the market real interest rate, and this was the same. And as a result of demand for loanable funds increasing, that caused real interest rate to go up. Which this used to be the investment. This is the new investment. Therefore, investment decrease. Well, investment decrease. That's the same thing as investment right here on this formula. So because investment decreases, that causes aggregate demand to decrease. If aggregate demand decreases, then aggregate demand comes down a little bit here. Now, how much does it come down? Does it crowd out a lot and aggregate demand decreases? Well, that depends on different schools of thought. Classical and neoclassical economists believe that the crowding out happens in a larger quantity. So you might crowd out almost entirely, all the way to where we originally started. Keynesian or mainstream economists, which is Keynesian for this course and for AP purposes, believe that only a little bit decreases. So the economy is still better off because we have boosted the economy, not up to here, but up to here. Okay, so that's the crowding out effect, right? That's the side effect of that. Do we have that with monetary policy? Does that happen with monetary policy? No. That's because government did not. It's not the government that's conducting this policy. It's the Federal Reserve, and they're not dealing with taxes and government spending. So taxes and government spending are not affected. So that doesn't happen. So that's kind of an advantage of monetary policy because we don't have that kind of a side effect. That counteracts part of what we wanted to do with monetary policy, with fiscal policy. Because of this, because aggregate demand decreased, that causes price level to decrease, output to decrease, price level decreases, output decreases, and unemployment increases. And we can come back around here and say, oh, this was the point after fiscal policy. Well, the current point moved more a little bit inward. In the same way from here, current point moved a little bit this way. Okay, so that's what we have. That's problem, solution, side effect. The next part is going to be foreign exchange market. before I get to that, which is going to be complicated, let's kind of connect the points that we had up here. I left out this savings interest, and I left out government printing money. Instead of, let's say, borrowing money, let's say government decides to print money, well, that's not going to affect loanable funds, because loanable funds is the supply and demand for all money that is being lent out and all the money that is being borrowed, right? But this is going to affect supply of money, not just the loanable funds, right? So that means that's this market right here, this graph. I wish I had more room so I can actually draw the new money market somewhere out there and link it to that. But what I'm going to do is, that's why it's useful that hopefully you guys are understanding what I'm doing right now, that I'm going to come back and say, oh, as a result of this, what's going to happen is that supply of money is going to increase. And because supply of money increases, that causes nominal interest rate to decrease. Nominal interest rate decreases, you know, we can go through this kind of calculation again, and then a real interest rate decrease. Real interest rate decreases, that causes investment to increase instead of decrease. So if federal government decides to print money instead of borrowing money, we don't have that side effect. We don't have aggregate demand decreasing. We actually have aggregate demand of an increase. So which one is it? Right? It depends on AP. They're going to give you questions. They're going to say, oh, you know, government goes into deficit. Let's say government prints money, then what happens? And then you can follow the chain reaction. Right? Or if the government decides to borrow money, then what happens? You follow a different chain reaction. Right? Another thing that I didn't connect with Laura was savings. Right? Savings is households are saving. And think about it this way. Household saving is the same thing as supply of loanable funds. If I'm saving money, that means I'm lending money out. Saving money means that I put money in a bank. The bank takes that money and lends it to somebody else. Or I may go directly to the corporation or government and say, hey, you want to borrow money? Here's money I'll give you. You borrow it from me for 3 years, plus pay me interest rate. Well, that's bonds, right? So if households save money, that's the same thing as supply of loanable funds. So if we follow this route and we say, hey, how does the changes savings affect real interest rate? Well, that's going to affect supply of loanable funds, which in this case is going to decrease real interest rate. So again, which one is it? Is it because of this side effect that real interest rate increases, or is it because of this that it decreases? It could be both. In AP, they're not going to ask you questions on both. You just have to know how to connect them. They're gonna specifically give you leading questions that say, hey, because of expansionary policy that you proposed for the recessionary scenario, what will happen to disposable income? Well, taxes are down, disposable income goes up. Because of the changes of what that you've shown in disposable income, what's going to happen to savings? Well, savings is going to go up. Because of the changes that you have shown in savings, what will happen to real interest rate? Oh, you're going to link this to supply of loanable funds increasing, and then real interest rates going up. So you have different routes that you can follow, right? I'm trying to connect it all together. Okay, now the next thing in here we're going to add is the currency market, or foreign exchange market. So let's draw foreign exchange market. Foreign exchange market for dollars. This is quantity of dollars on the international market. And dollar expressed in terms of euro. Let's choose euro as the currency.
Wait, this is going to connect to this.
It's going to connect.
It's going to
So I'm going to come back and connect it to this. All of this kind of connects right there.
Oh, so
It's, yeah, it's red because net exports. Right? It's going to affect net exports. So that's how we're going to.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
good, yeah.
All right, guys. So we've got dollars reflected in terms of euro. Whenever you're putting down price of dollar in terms of other currency, if you're drawing the market for dollars, that means dollar is going to be a denominator, always, always, always. If you're drawing market for euro, then euro is going to be denominator, whatever we're comparing it to, let's say yen or yuan or ruble or whatever, it's going to be a numerator. But that currency that we're drawing is going to be a denominator. And again, this is quantity of dollars on the international market. not just all dollars in the United States. It's basically if I go to the bank and say, hey, I'm going to Europe and I need to actually have some euros, I'll buy euros from you. I'm supplying dollars on the international. And that leads us to who is supplying dollars on the international market and who is demanding dollars on the international market. So who's supplying dollars on the international market? Americans, when they buy foreign products and services, or when they invest money in foreign countries. They're pumping dollars outside the United States when they do that. Right? Who's demanding dollars on the international market? Foreigners. Not all foreigners, if they don't want to buy American products and they're not interested in investing in the United States, they're not demanding it. But if they want to buy American products and services, or they want to invest money in the United States, either real estate or financial investments or financial assets, then they're going to be demanding dollars, right? So it's very important to remember, it's Americans who supply dollars on the international market, and it's the foreigners who demand dollars on the international market. We're going to draw the same thing down here. Euro, dollar, quantity of dollars on the international market, supply of dollars, demand for dollars. Right? Well, I'm going to come back to this in a while. Now, the thing that we have to do is, how do we link it to all of this, right? We have to remember the determinants of foreign exchange market, or currency market. Those are tastes, if national tastes have changed, or individuals' tastes have changed in the United States, or tastes of foreigners have changed. 2 is the incomes, if the incomes have changed. 3 is price level. The price level has changed, relative price has changed in the United States compared to the other countries. 4 is real interest rate, and real interest rate, if real interest rate has changed in the United States relative to the other countries. And then 5 is speculation. So we can eliminate a number of these, which based on what we have done in here, we can just say, oh, that's not impacted, that doesn't change. Like for example, none of this of what we have done in here, we can link to like tastes and preferences changing in the United States. And not easily, or not,
In the United States
or in foreign countries, right? We don't know. This doesn't like expansion fixed costs, contraction fixed costs, and all that doesn't change like if Europeans like American products more or less, or Americans like foreign products more or less. So that's not an impact on the currency market. Speculation too, I mean, I guess we can kind of go a little more in deeper and say, oh, because of this, a deficit and everything else, foreigners might not want to invest money in the United States, people are going to believe that the dollar is going to depreciate and blah, 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 and then they might actually, speculate for that and then get involved. But, it's usually not an issue in here where it's not an impact as a result of all of this, right? That leaves 3 other determinants. So if I wish I had those things that you see in universities, they have the whiteboards where you can slide up and down, right? I wish I had that, because what we need to do now is, for the fiscal policy scenario, I can't just simply use one currency market. I have to use 3. It's 3 different scenarios that I have to go to. But I'm not going to be able to do that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all of those here. So it's going to be a little bit messy, right? So there's 3 scenarios that we can connect to, 3 different chain reactions, right? One is because of real interest rate. U.S. real interest rate has increased. See, this has happened. Second one is U.S. income. What has happened to U.S. income as a result of expansion of this clause?
Oh, it's gone.
It's gone up. I haven't explicitly written it out here, but income is related to real domestic output and unemployment. If unemployment is down in the United States, that means people that didn't have jobs before, didn't have incomes before, now they do have jobs, they do have income, overall national income increases, right? So as a result of this, income increases. So, income, U.S. income has increased. And U.S. price level has increased too, because we know that as a result of expansion of fixed costs, the price level has increased. Yeah.
So those are the 3 graphs that you're doing? Or
3 graphs that I would like to do. Meaning that, you know, I'm gonna see what's the impact of this on the currency market, this on the currency market, this on the currency market. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do them all on the same graph. So it's gonna be a little bit less. Right? So first, let's do the real interest rate. Right? Real interest rate is this right here. We know the real interest rate in the United States increased. This is gonna affect this market. We're going to look at it and say, okay, does it affect supply or demand? You could argue that it affects both, but the more bigger impact is demand for dollars. Because when you're thinking about real interest rate, you want to think about, do foreigners want to invest money in the United States? Do they want to buy American bonds? Well, if real interest rates in the United States has increased, let's say you're a European household member and you have extra money set aside, and you decide, I want to buy a bond. I can buy a European bond and earn 4% return on that annually, or I can buy an American bond and earn 7% return annually. Which one is better? 7%. So they would want to buy more American bonds, and in order for them to buy American bonds, then the demand for dollars is going to increase. So that causes dollar to appreciate. So let's rewrite this ratio in here. Don't try to do that in your head. Always kind of rewrite it. Dollar for euro, 1 for 1. Let's say it was 1 for 1 to start with. If dollar appreciates, what's the new exchange rate? When we're looking at 2 to 1, it's disruptive because it's deceptive because we can say, oh, went from 1 to 2, but that's not the case. It takes $2 to buy 1 euro. So if dollar appreciates, for 1 euro, you get $2. Or for $1, you get 2 euros, right? So you get more euros for $1. That's dollar appreciating, right? That's why it's important to maintain this ratio in here in dollar to the denominator when we're graphing the market for dollars, because this used to be the original exchange rate, which was 1 euro divided by $1, which equals 1. Now this is the new exchange rate, which is 2 euros divided by $1, which is 2. The dollar has appreciated as a result of this. If dollar appreciates, then what happens to American exports and American imports? Exports go down. Let's think about why. Because in American exports, that means they're being bought by foreign consumers, right? So if foreigner wants to buy American product, before the exchange rate changed, they took 1 euro, got $1, and bought products in the United States for $1. Now, in order to get that $1, they have to pay 2 euros. So it's more expensive. So American exports become more expensive, so American exports go down. What happens to American imports? They go up, right? Because what happens is that now you take $1, you get 2 euros, and the prices in Europe are the same, but for you, because you're getting more euros, it's cheaper, right? So imports go up. That means larger amount minus smaller amount, that's net exports right here, and then that means net exports are going to decrease. Net exports is the same thing as this right here, and net exports decreases. Net exports decreases, that causes aggregate demand to decrease even further. So we decrease aggregate demand even further, which causes price level to decrease even further. Price level decreases, output decreases, unemployment increases. And then we can come back around here and say, oh, this used to be the point where we were, it moves more inwards. This used to be the point where we are, and it moves more towards this one. So when we're looking at the net export effect through real interest rates, it actually contradicts our expansionary policy with goals, right? It moves away from where we wanted aggregate demand to be. Now, but that's only one impact. What about U.S. incomes increasing? Well, if U.S. income increases, so in here what we have is the real interest rate increase, that causes dollar to appreciate, which causes net exports to decrease. What about U.S. income increasing? If U.S. incomes increase, yeah.
I need to get a new battery pack. It is a minute left.
That's okay. You can exchange it. You can